We will now hear the presentation of Tbaytel. Please introduce yourself and your colleagues, and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We thank you for this opportunity to appear before you on behalf of Tbaytel. My name is Dan Tbaytel, President and Chief Executive Officer of Tbaytel. And with me today, to my right, is Kathleen Jones, our Vice President, Sales, Marketing, Communications. And to my left is Amy Mounier, Director, Marketing and Communications. Tbaytel is a small, independent, municipally owned wireless service provider based in the city of Thunder Bay and operating in northwestern Ontario. We began providing telecommunication services over 100 years ago and entered the cellular market in the early 1990s. Several initiatives, such as the establishment of Tbaytel as a municipal services board and the creation of strategic business relationships, have allowed Tbaytel to grow and maintain its position as a strong wireless service provider in Thunder Bay and the region. In our appearance 5 years ago before the Commission on similar issues, Tbaytel, along with MTS and SaskTel, spoke to the fact that we are not one of the big three national carriers, as we lack their size or economies of scale, but rather that we are regional carriers. Today, Tbaytel is here again as a small regional mobile wireless service provider to put forth its comments, opinions, and recommendations on the views expressed by the Commission in this proceeding. As the regional market leader in northwestern Ontario, Tbaytel continues to meet the needs of its customers with not only competitive rates, but through new service plans and pricing options as well. Consumers in Tbaytel's market area have a choice of service providers. In addition to Tbaytel, Bell Mobility, TELUS Mobility, Virgin Mobile, Lucky Mobile, Koodo, and Public Mobile are also present, making for a healthy, competitive choice environment. Essentially, Tbaytel, as the regional wireless carrier, is fulfilling a number of roles. We provide high-quality mobility networks to rural and remote, low-density areas throughout northwestern Ontario. We are a viable, independent carrier in a vast geographic market, and we ensure that our customers are the beneficiaries of a healthy, competitive wireless environment.
We are here today to continue to explore the preliminary view of the Commission that any new regulatory framework for mobile wireless carriers should include mandated wholesale mobile virtual network operator access. We, however, are not here today to speak to the numerous studies and reports that have been put on record of this proceeding by several interveners. The way we can provide value to this consultation is to speak from our own unique experiences. Tbaytel is not aligned with the Commission's preliminary view that the notion of mandatory access to facility-based mobile wireless carriers will provide sustainable competition. MVNOs should not be considered guaranteed avenues to sustainable competition at reasonable rates, but rather as a conduit for the possible entrance of countless MVNOs having varied operating structures and limited long-term staying power. Our Canadian networks are considered among the best in the world and have been built through ongoing capital investment and stable, responsible operators. Tbaytel is firm on its position that mandating the provision of wholesale MVNO access, especially in Tbaytel's serving area, is not warranted for sustainable wireless competition. The CWTA supported this position with its May 2019 intervention when it stated that the mandating of MVNO wholesale access would threaten an independent regional carrier's capacity to contribute to sustainable competition by favoring economically inefficient MVNOs whose business models are dependent on gaining regulatory access to the national carriers' networks at discounted rates. Mandating wholesale MVNO access that gives MVNOs the freedom to enter and exit our market without having to risk major investment capital damages Tbaytel's ability to recover capital expenditures made for our low-density, rural, and remote coverage area. Further, future expenditures for continued network expansion and technology upgrades could potentially be crippled by the presence of mandated MVNOs, especially if market share losses are combined with the potential of no interconnection revenues. In an environment of mandated MVNO access, Tbaytel may not be given consideration by that MVNO. An MVNO launching in multiple markets, for example, would favor national carrier networks in order to streamline the launch process. Additionally, it is presumed that the national carrier interconnection rates may be lower based on their economies of scale. Overall, there is a likelihood for the reduction of investment in spectrum and networks by not only new entrants, but also by the existing carriers, who will assume the disproportionate recovery of their capital investment. Generally speaking, the wireless market should continue to be allowed to develop naturally, as it has in the past, unaffected by regulatory intervention.
Tbaytel, in the next part of our presentation, has put aside its conscious bias against mandated wholesale MVNO access and has provided recommendations for a regulatory regime that would provide for the inclusion of mandated MVNO access in the event that the Commission proceeds with its ill-advised implementation. Tbaytel defines a full MVNO to be a Canadian service provider registered with the Commission that owns and operates core network hardware and in some cases uses the spectrum and radio access network and other facilities or services of a wireless carrier as necessary for the provision of mobile services to consumers. Tbaytel does not view flanker brands as MVNOs due to their ownership structure. They are simply a marketing tactic to address different consumer segments. Branded resellers, entities that have no wireless infrastructure but may have a billing platform, have a sole reliance on their underlying carriers for their presence and existence in the markets. Brand resellers exist today in the marketplace, and Tbaytel does not believe they need to be defined and mandated as an MVNO. For the purpose of its proposal, Tbaytel is extending the definition of a full MVNO by having an entity considered an eligible full MVNO only when it has less than 1 million subscribers nationally. This last condition is deemed reasonable, considering that an entity having over 1 million subscribers certainly should have the facilities and financial resources to become a full-fledged mobile network operator. Key to Tbaytel's proposal for the provision of mobile wireless services in a regulatory environment containing mandated wholesale MVNO access is that it should be done on a regional basis. Where a regional provider has established a facilities-based mobile wireless network, the full MVNOs should first connect directly with the regional provider, such as Tbaytel. Accordingly, Tbaytel is advocating that a prospective MVNO will have to directly connect with Tbaytel as the regional carrier in order to enter Tbaytel's mobile wireless market, thereby allowing for Tbaytel as the regional carrier to take priority over the national carriers in the provision of wholesale MVNO access in its regional serving territory. It is important that regional carriers such as Tbaytel get priority access to MVNO interconnection opportunities and revenues in order to level the playing field. It is also important that access rates consider the compensation for initial use plus the impact that the MVNO will have on the mobile network operator's network over time. Tbaytel believes that the greater the investment of the entering MVNO, the more likely that competition will remain over a longer period of time. However, Tbaytel is also aware that in the event wholesale access is mandated, the degree that any mobile network operator has to share its facilities will have a bearing as well on the future sustainability of the investment they are able to make on wireless networks. It is Tbaytel's opinion that commercially negotiated agreements, reasonably discussed and without imposed timelines, between mobile network operators and eligible MVNOs is the preferred and recommended route to take and can work if required in the Commission's preliminary proposed view of a mandated wholesale access regulatory framework, with each MVNO access service having its own agreement and each subject to a 5-year term. The majority of agreements that exist or are used today contain some form of arbitration or dispute process, either by the Commission or by an alternative third party. It would be through the agreement negotiation process that the type of arbitration process would be discussed and agreed to, inclusive of any specific conditions that would drive the initiation of dispute or lead to arbitration. Tbaytel further recommends that all rates related to MVNO access service will be commercially negotiated, allowing the parties to identify and deal with the circumstances that are particular to their individual situations. The negotiated arbitration process previously mentioned would allow for the arbitration of any dispute that may arise in the context of rate development. Due to the complexity and the need for security related to the wholesale elements of access to the mobile network operators' networks, Tbaytel also recommends that MVNOs should not be permitted to resell network access to other entities, nor should there be any set-aside of capacity in reserve for the MVNO's use.
Tbaytel is well aware of the importance of future development and deployment of 5G networks throughout Canada, and of their complexities and high costs. Since 5G services are based on a dense network of thousands of small cells, that need to be attached to a greater number of locations, deployment costs, will be significantly higher in the future. Also requiring consideration is the challenge of the availability and cost of dark fiber and access to municipal assets, both necessary for the connection of 5G small cells. While Tbaytel's plans to launch 5G have not yet been finalized, Tbaytel anticipates that its rollout will begin in the next few years and continue for the foreseeable future. And for that reason, it is premature to discuss what will and what won't work. Tbaytel will be facing challenges, such as accessing spectrum targeted for 5G, along with how it will deploy 5G equipment. Even though Tbaytel recognizes the impact that 5G will have on the wireless industry and its subscribers, it is also cognizant that in the event that wholesale MVNO access is mandated, not only will the investment in the current wireless infrastructure be curtailed, but considering the wants of the potential MVNOs, future investments in 5G technologies will also be the target for reductions by the mobile network operators. Once again, our position remains that the Commission should not mandate the provision of wholesale MVNO access service because it will significantly harm the efforts made by Canada's regional wireless providers. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for this chance to make our presentation today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Commissioner Barron.
Thank you. Welcome, and thank you very much for your presentation. I want to start the questioning this morning in with the areas of pricing and competition in your market. I noted you spoke about competition, in particular in North Bay, and you also mentioned in your interventions that you believe that competition is gaining momentum in Canada. So let me start with a general question. You are the dominant provider in your regions. Can you explain whether you consider the mobile market to be competitive in Northern Ontario?
Bell came in built over our entire serving territory, and thereby allowed both Bell, TELUS, and all of their flanker brands to start to compete with us. We do find it to be a very competitive market, and I have to say that as it relates to competition, Tbaytel has no problem with what we deem as fair competition. We think that that's good, and we accept all that comes with that. I think our concern in terms of competition here is that when competition is something that is imposed and where the people that are coming to compete have absolutely no risk, no investment, and that they come forward to benefit their own companies and will harm those carriers that have already borne the burden of the costs of this very complicated business. That's where the competition we feel is, it's unfavorable toward us. So we do feel we have a competitive market, and we're happy to compete within one.
Yeah, I just might want to add, in defining competitive market, certainly we have been sharing, and I think the views of the Competition Bureau as well show that, I think they refer to the regional players as disruptors. From that viewpoint, we have long shared the fact that for a great number of years, we've been priced somewhere between 30 to 40% lower than other larger centres across Canada. So we certainly believe that there is a competitive landscape in our serving territory.
Thank you. So let me pick up on that point that you just made about pricing being 30 to 40% lower in your markets. To what extent is the fact that Tbaytel is municipally owned influence the price of the mobile wireless market?
Yeah, I can tell you there's no direct connection to that. Certainly our shareholder, views the investment that they've made in Tbaytel as one that produces, I'll call them dividends, back to the municipal entity. We have some very unique corporate objectives, without question. We look to try and develop investments that will create more economic development in Thunder Bay and in the region itself. We look to help create jobs from that standpoint as well. But from a objective of delivering the service, we ensure that we're competitively priced. And so we have to be fluid with whatever is in the marketplace at the time.
Fair enough. Now, in your May intervention, you submitted a postpaid plan that said pricing was on average 47% lower in Tbaytel's market when compared to the prices that were being charged by the national MNOs. And I'm just trying to better understand the data. How did you come up with the average, and maybe indicate whether you were using prices, posted prices, or whether they were in particular geographic markets? I mean, just trying to get a sense of where that percentage came from.
Absolutely, I can speak to that. So as Kathleen had mentioned earlier, Bell entered our market and have begun directly competing with us. Now, interestingly enough, in our marketplace, they have special, what they call Northwestern Ontario plans. So those plans contain the same elements in terms of features and data allotments and calling options that they do across other parts of Canada. However, they are priced significantly less in Northwestern Ontario. So that calculation is really the variance between the price of that plan as to how it's priced nationally versus how it's priced locally in our Thunder Bay and Northwestern Ontario market.
If you were to do that same comparison on a local basis, do you have a sense of what the percentage would be? So you're using national MNO pricing, but if you use the MNO pricing in your territory?
Oh, that is
30 to 40%?
The calculation. Yes. So, for example, say a 1 gig plan at the national level at one point was $115, and in our market it was $60.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, has anything changed in terms of the pricing when you generated that data and today, given what has evolved in the last year in terms of unlimited pricing plans, et cetera?
Yes, absolutely. Certainly exciting to work in such a dynamic environment of telecommunications, and we did see a lot of changes that began in the summer of 2019. So since then, we have seen prices somewhat change, but there is still customized pricing in Northwestern Ontario. So we heard some of the other speakers speak to the fact that some of the big three carriers start their data plans at 5 or 6 gigs or higher. Specifically in our market, they have lower level, entry-level plans available just in Northwestern Ontario that start at the 2 gig level, for example. So they have different price points and options to compete directly with us as the regional carrier.
Now, with relation to overage charges, can you explain your practices with relation to data overage charges in your plans?
Yes, absolutely. So with regards to our postpaid plans, you have a data bucket allotment, and anything over that you do incur data overage charges. I believe those are sitting at 7 cents meg for overage. We do have processes in place, though, to proactively inform our customers about their data usage. So while we don't have what we saw from some of the big three as unlimited plans, we do proactively notify our customers at 75% of their data usage, so letting them know where they are at in their cycle and how much they've consumed, as well as 100%. And then we also follow the Wireless Code of Conduct practices in terms of capping those overages. From the unlimited plans perspective, that is certainly something that we have investigated to try to determine if that is something that we would like to do. However, we are still looking at the concept of implementing those changes in our network and the benefits to consumers about the throttling speeds.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move now to low-cost plans. Do you offer any low-cost plans, and if so, how do you promote them? And here, I have to admit, I went onto your website, and I had a little difficulty finding the low-cost options. So I'd like to see if you could point me in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, our website plan section has overgone a bit of an overhaul. We're actually in the process of redoing our entire website this year. But we did overhaul how our plans are displayed in about October of last year. So I'm not sure the time frame as to when you went and took a peek. But all of our plans and pricing are listed on our website. We do have a number of different categories for plan pricing in there. And our plans range from $25 postpaid upwards. So we do have low-cost options on postpaid that include voice and text, entry-level options, as well as multiple data options. In addition to that, on the prepaid side, we do have low-cost prepaid plan options that begin as low as $10 a month. All of our plans and pricing outside of being posted on our website are available in our corporate retail store. So our brochures and fly sheets are regularly displayed on our counters for customers to come in and grab. And our customer service agents are trained on all of our plans and pricing, and they sell based on needs of the consumer. So they have the discovery conversation on the consumer to try to understand what's best to position to them. And unlike some of the national carriers, we don't have a flanker brand. So it's in our best interest to actually advertise all of our plans and pricing available because we do have that wide array of options.
Okay. Were you here this morning when the previous intervener was talking about a basic low-cost plan in the range of $25 to $35? Could you give me a sense of what your lowest cost plan would be that includes data?
Yes. Our lowest cost plan that includes data is our light 1 gigabyte plan, and that is at $45 per month. That's for if you have your own device that you would like to bring, or if you'd like to finance a device. And if for a phone to be included, that would be $55 a month.
Okay. Thank you. Now, if we talk about low-cost occasional use plans, we've had providers stating on the record that the market is very well served in that area. There was an exhibit that was distributed at the beginning of the hearing, Exhibit 2, which details some of those low-cost occasional plan options. In your view, is the market well served by those plans? And I guess a subsidiary question, is the Tbaytel plan that is in Exhibit 2 still available?
Yeah, certainly speaking to our market in terms of the plans and pricing available in the Tbaytel serving area, we do feel as though there are a variety of different low-cost plan options available. And in that exhibit, yes, the Tbaytel prepaid plan is still available and has not changed.
And do you believe that there is a subset of users whose interests are not being met by these occasional use low-cost plans? Or do you believe that the market is well served?
Certainly, I cannot speak to any inquiries that we've received from our customer base in fact that we have not had a viable plan option available to them. We do often feel that when customers are coming in looking for service, then in having that conversation based on the customer's needs, that our prepaid service is definitely an option for customers that need a low cost of entry or just a low cost emergency use plan. So from our perspective, we feel as though our market is well served.
Okay. Now, if the Commission decided to impose a condition of service under Section 24 of the Act to ensure that the information regarding these plans is clearly communicated to potentially interested consumers, and this would involve ensuring proper training for customer service representatives, providing links to those plans on the website, prominent links, visually displaying information in retail stores, etc. What is your position? Would this kind of service condition be appropriate?
Certainly from a Tbaytel perspective, we would have no concerns with that type of imposition. We feel as though we're already meeting those mandates today in terms of prominence and communication of all of our plan options. And we certainly are proud of the training that we do with all of our customer service agents. Certainly from any new hires, there's an extensive training program that they go through and that they actually need to pass a test before they're allowed to get in front of speaking to customers. So we would have no concerns with that from a Tbaytel perspective.
Thank you. I'm moving on to the topic of win-backs. You are the dominant provider in your area, but has Tbaytel had any challenges with respect to win-backs from the national MNOs?
No, we really don't see this as an issue in our marketplace. We don't have a lot of instances of aggressive win-back actions, and we also don't participate in win-back activity ourselves.
Can you speak to any proactive measures that you would employ with your own customers in terms of ensuring that you are meeting their evolving needs with your plan options?
Well, we do regular research with our customers when they have transactions with Tbaytel to talk about their experiences and if we met their needs. And we track with very high results from all our consumer groups. And that goes on, that's a regular post-transactional survey that happens throughout the year. Additionally, we are a fairly small company, and so we have regular meetings with frontline staff and marketing staff to be able to talk about the fact of the kinds of customer concerns or complaints that they're hearing, and we have a really good sort of natural pipeline to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the consumer.
Thank you. Now I want to move on to the MVNO proposals that have been put on the record. I'd like to know your opinion specifically on the Competition Bureau's proposal for regional facilities-based carrier MVNO model.
Certainly. First off, I'd like to compliment the Competition Bureau on the work that they had done in recognizing the benefits being provided by the regionals. I think, as I said before, we long spoke to the competitive landscape that exists. There is certainly a theme running through that they believe the regionals are best positioned to be able to expand outside of their traditional serving territory. They have the structure, they have the wherewithal and the capital processes in place to be able to be successful. I certainly can understand that thinking. I did not take from their conclusion that opening the door to full MVNO is necessarily the best result for Canadians long term. So I would certainly concur with that as well. But at the same time, I see challenges in terms of our own ability to move outside of our traditional serving footprint. So, looking for specific direction on whether or not we would be able to achieve that would certainly take a great deal more work.
So I take it that if the Commission were to look at the Competition Bureau's model, that you would not consider taking advantage of access if you qualified under the Bureau's model?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think there are a great number of factors to be considered. One of the things that has allowed Tbaytel to be as successful as they are is certainly our brand recognition in our serving territory. As I said in my opening, we've been around for decades. We believe that we do provide good service to our customers, high quality networks, but replicating that brand presence outside of our serving territory certainly has its challenges. I think we heard some of that from the interveners this morning, that at least in Manitoba, some folks who were surveyed didn't even recognize that there was another provider. I know Explorer Mobile last week talked to the challenges of being a new provider in a new market. We would face those same challenges. I think more to the point as well is it would certainly change our risk profile as an organization. Being municipally owned, I can assure you that municipalities have a very conservative approach to risk, and so as a result of that, we would have to do far more work to understand whether that opportunity and how far-reaching it might be represents something that we can tolerate.
Okay. Because the Bureau's model seems to suggest that MVNO access would be granted only if the regional facilities-based carriers had spectrum and they had not yet built out. And I understand the conservative elements of your model, but would the Bureau's proposal potentially encourage you to purchase additional spectrum to deploy a network in areas where you otherwise would not have considered doing so?
Again, we do have spectrum that we've been successful in acquiring that reaches outside of our current footprint. And for those of you who may not be familiar, we serve from the Manitoba border to essentially Sault Ste. Marie. But the tier license that we have specifically reaches as far down to Parry Sound. So there certainly is the ability, even with the spectrum we might have today, to reach outside of that footprint. Acquiring spectrum outside of that traditional footprint, again, I believe brings a certain risk appetite that we would have to do further work on to understand whether or not we'd be capable of. And today, we don't hold any spectrum outside of our serving territory in kind of new markets. So we would be starting from scratch, and I could see that being a challenge.
Okay. With respect to any spectrum that you have that has not been deployed yet, could you undertake to provide the Commission with plans for that spectrum, and additionally, if it might be impacted by the Bureau's proposal?
Certainly. We do have arrangements with some of our strategic partners in terms of shared use, but we can undertake to provide that.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I want to discuss the broad MVNO model that you suggested with its different characteristics in your presentation this morning. And there were also elements that you had brought out in the course of your interventions. Specifically, you had some suggestions with regards to eligibility criteria, and also a position that you took on the fact that there should be no capacity set-asides for broad MVNOs. Can you discuss those elements of your model?
Certainly. We look to see who has been successful in developing a regional solution or a alternative fourth provider solution. And we feel it's very important to make sure that you have the backbone and the structure in place to be able to continue to deploy. We had created a 1 million subscriber threshold, thinking that that would certainly reflect a mobile network operator that has sufficient size and scale, has continued to build support mechanisms, if you will, to be able to be successful as they continue to branch out. We look at it relative to our own size. We serve a very large geographic area, and we feel that a MNO that has subscribers over that limit certainly has the wherewithal to be able to replicate that in other parts that they may not serve currently.
Okay. You had spoken about a case-by-case approach to eligibility for potential MNOs. Would you say, were you suggesting that it be the Commission that would perform a review on a case-by-case basis, or were you thinking of a different kind of review process?
Yeah, I think the way we looked at it is we were concerned that if MVNOs were to be put into play, it would have significant impact on Tbaytel. As the market leader in our territory, it would likely mean that proportionally we would lose the most number of customers potentially. It would also mean that if you're an MVNO looking to get to speed to market, you're likely to contract with one national player. Thereby the wholesale revenue would go to that larger player. As a result, our top-line revenue and then eventually the bottom line would be most impacted as a result of that. I want to remind the Commission that years ago we appeared with both MTS and SaskTel to talk about mandatory roaming pricing. And to the Commission's credit, they realized that as a small provider in low-density, high-cost serving areas, the decision was made that mandated rates would apply only to the larger players and not the smaller players, that they were free to go out and negotiate rates on their own. Well, I can tell you effectively that repriced the market instantly, overnight. And as a result of that, anyone who was looking for national roaming agreements went to the larger players. They didn't look at the regionals anymore. And as a result of that, we were left in a position to try and recover from what was some considerable lost roaming revenue for us. So we want to, I guess, make sure that the Commission is cognizant of the fact that even imposing something on the large players only will undoubtedly have an impact on the small regional providers.
Can you speak to your suggestion that MVNOs be implemented via the regional players and not via the national MNOs? Would one of those reasons be to compensate for potentially lost revenues
Yeah,
from an
certainly.
MVNO?
It's lost revenue and the impact that that has in terms of a trickle-down effect to our ability to reinvest in network or support our shareholder.
Thank you. I want to clarify your position with respect to commercial negotiations. From what I understand, it is your view that rates and conditions be left to the parties to negotiate, and that dispute resolution also be up to the parties in terms of what mechanism they choose.
I think from Tbaytel's perspective, we have a long history of being able to negotiate with our partners effectively, and that would include all terms and conditions, including dispute resolution. We don't have a lot of experience on the wireline side using the Commission's final offer arbitration, so we really aren't able to comment on whether or not we think that that would be appropriate.
Fair enough. I'd like to ask you some questions on roaming. And specifically, you spoke briefly about 5G. In your opinion, does the current definition of roaming and the roaming tariffs for the MNOs apply to 5G services?
I wouldn't. I think it's premature to draw that conclusion from our standpoint. I know the investment that we'd be looking at. We know the complexity that would be involved. I'd have a hard time drawing a conclusion at this time to whether or not that's appropriate.
Okay. And with regards to seamless roaming, it's been a highly contentious area, but is this something that you are interested in? Or have you tried to negotiate a seamless roaming agreement?
Because we have a marketplace that is fairly contained, we do not have, and we have a network that is very well built out, we don't have a lot of areas where this is an issue for our customers. We do have seamless roaming with our primary roaming partner, but we don't have a lot of points of interconnection for that to matter. We're not really in a position to comment on whether we think in general this needs to be something that's mandated, but again, in our area, we are not seeing this as an issue.
So you don't see a big problem with dropped calls among your customer base? Thank you. Okay. Just to double back on your model for how to level the playing field with having the regional MNOs be the source, the regional carriers be the source for MNOs if that was what the Commission mandated. How would this work from a technical standpoint?
Technically, they would enter into the same agreements that they would with any of the other players. We would enter into a access agreement for them. I'm not an engineer by background, so if it's more technical than that, I'm sure my group will tell me. But at the end of the day, we certainly believe that we would have the wherewithal to do that. It does certainly create another complexity for those looking to be an MVNO. But it's our view that it doesn't necessarily or should not necessarily be easy to enter into that. And if we're looking to continue to strengthen the fourth carrier option across Canada, I think this is a very viable solution.
Thank you. Voice over LTE roaming. Do you support voice over LTE on your network?
Yes, we just have recently turned that up, and we're actually weeks away from putting it across our entire subscriber base.
And do you have plans for supporting voice over LTE roaming with your domestic roaming partners?
Yes, we will have roaming with our primary roaming partner.
And I take it then that you plan to support the 911 real-time text with your roaming partners by the 31st of December 2020 as mandated by the Commission?
Yes, we will.
Thank you. So I have one last question before I pass it off to the Chair and to further questions from my colleagues. As a small regional player, are there specific challenges that the Commission should consider when developing its mobile wireless policy in this proceeding?
I think keeping in mind, I'll call it the work and heavy lifting that has been done by both the regionals and all new entrants. Quite simply, we took a bit of a gamble for new entrants in 2008 when Spectrum first became available, to building network, to getting roaming agreements, to getting handset agreements. That's just scratching the surface of what it means to be a good mobile wireless provider. I would hate to see those efforts undone as a result of a decision that is, I hope, looking to find out whether or not we have a competitive landscape and not turning this into an exercise of how to draw the conclusion that MVNO is the answer. I believe we have a competitive landscape. I believe that that can be said for a number of regions across Canada. So I'd caution against undoing the successes of what's already been established.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer to my questions. And I will pass it off to the Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Barron. Commissioner Levy?
Hello. You mentioned in your presentation today that once an entity gets to 1 million subs, that should be the cutoff for when they become an MNO. How did you arrive at that number?
Yeah, respectfully, I asked the same question about the 25% reduction. But I believe, as I said earlier, that there is a threshold whereby a MNO can continue to sustain a successful operation, and we believe that that's the quantum. The industry is not a stranger to setting different limits. We have a 10% Canadian market share for set-aside. We have a 20,000 subscriber threshold for BDU licensing. How did we arrive at those numbers? There's probably a lot of debate, but certainly we feel that there is a certain threshold by which the current MNO does not need to have that head start, I'll call it.
So you didn't do any particular study, you sort of looked at the landscape?
Looked at the landscape and decided what might be appropriate in terms of who might be able to continue to develop networks successfully.
And if I understand your position, you would rather not see MVNOs of any type, but should they be mandated, you want some opportunities to play in that sandbox as well. What do you, therefore, as you make those determinations on a business case, what do you see as what could be some real opportunities for you should they be mandated?
I would suggest that we're not seeing an opportunity, quite honestly. So our first position, and you correctly articulated, is that we don't believe MVNOs have a place inside of particularly inside of the regional marketplaces. I don't see it as a opportunity, but I do see it as a reduction of the risk that would come with MVNO, and that's all it would be at the end of the day for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one or two last questions for my part. In response to a question from Commissioner Barron, you answered quite clearly that you feel that consumers in your territory are well served. I heard that. I think you were in the room this morning during the earlier presentation in relation to situation in Manitoba. And I guess I'd just like to ask you what comments you have about those of the lowest, of a lower income levels, how they are being served well in your territory, just given what we heard this morning.
Yes, certainly I can speak from our perspective.
Microphone. Somebody else is on, yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, I can speak from our perspective, and I had addressed it a little bit earlier just about the fact that we do have low-cost plan options available for consumers today. But specifically, one of the largest I guess, references of our brand is our social giving component. And through that social giving, we work with a lot of not-for-profit organizations upon request to provide them with loaner devices and or $0 rate plans to assist them in their needs to run their not-for-profit organizations. We also have some special programs in place to support newcomers to Canada. So we take into account that there are newcomers and a lot of them don't have credit built up. So we have special programs in place with our multicultural associations to make sure that they're not given any undue preference in terms of preventing them from signing up for service, for deposits and things like that, things that would create barriers for them. And we also work with employment agencies. We have some programs in place for those in our communities that are looking for employment that may not have the ability or have had the means to get a cell phone. And we provide them with free service while they're seeking employment so that they can be reachable by possible employers to contact them for interviews or follow-ups to help them just become a little bit more successful as they're trying to get off their feet. So those are the kind of programs that we have in place from a wireless perspective, in addition to a number of wireline solutions. We have a Phones for Families program where we provide landline service to vulnerable people in our community that have school-aged children so that the school can contact them about their children if need be, if there's emergencies or progress updates. And then we also participate in the Connecting Families program to provide the low-cost broadband service. So I would say we're unique in our approach, that we really are front and center when it comes to social giving and helping those in our community.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned low-cost plans. Again, I'm just looking at your site, and I think your response earlier, and if I'm looking at this correctly, your lowest cost plan, including data, is $45. Is that correct? 1 gigabyte unlimited voice. So you've no doubt heard our discussions about the desirability of mandating a low-cost plan of 2 gigabytes for $35. Well, would you say, do you have any comments on that proposal specifically?
I think specifically what we need to consider is just the separation of service and the cost of the phone. So that is something that I think needs to be thought out. So a lot of the plans need to factor in the cost of the recovery of the cost of the device. And as we had heard earlier from some of the interveners, those cost of devices have been increasing, certainly over the last several years.
But sorry to interrupt. That plan is a bring your own phone, is it not? Or is that with a phone? Did I misunderstand?
Oh, no, you are correct. $45 is a bring your own device plan.
So I guess just to be a little more pointed, or you prepared or able to introduce a low-cost plan of 2 gigabyte for $35?
We'd have to look at what our cost is to be able to support that. If I understood the intervener this morning, they talked about a plan with a device. At $25, we'd be hard-pressed to be able to find a device that would allow us to recover that cost of the device.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you very much for your submissions.